Okay, let's get started if possible. So, thank you all for coming to this briefing, as I like to call it. My name is Azar Bistavros. I am the freshly appointed Associate Provost for Computing and Data Sciences. And what I'll do is just give you a little bit of how we ended up here today. And this is a process that started a while back. As a matter of fact, you can go all the way back to the start of the Data Science Initiative, et cetera. But about a year and a half ago, 2018, July, President Brown tasked a task force to think about data science at BU. And that committee worked hard and produced a report. You all are familiar with it. The result of that was an announcement in the summer to create the Faculty of Computing and Data Sciences. And so what I'd like to do is just quickly on perhaps one slide tell you what it is. So the Faculty of Computing and Data Sciences, it's a degree granting academic unit, which means it will have faculty and it will have academic programs. It is designed to be different from the existing schools and colleges in the sense that it is, by design, needs to be porous and permeable. BU sees this as a way to catalyze development of computing and data sciences across all of BU. And obviously, a big anchor for that is the new building. So we'll have to always to show that building on every slide we do. Now, how is it different from existing colleges? This is a slide I stole from the provost when she talks about the Faculty of Computing and Data Sciences. There is a recognition, and I think all of you agree, that every discipline is a culture that needs to nurture, it needs to go deep in it, which naturally leads into what we like to call, maybe we don't like to call, silos. And the Faculty of Computing and Data Sciences is supposed to break these silos or connect across these silos. So it is a university-wide, and this is why it sits under the provost as opposed to having its own school or college. And the nature of, what do we mean by the nature of it? It has to do with what was announced in the provost's memo about creation of the faculty. It will have a mix of faculty. Some of them will be 100% appointed in that new faculty, and maybe even more, or certainly more, who are going to be jointly appointed with existing academic units. A very important piece of that is the curriculum and program developments. And finally, this is also meant to allow for secondary appointments in it, even if they're not budgeted. As the provost mentioned, and as in the slide that I mentioned about how we came to this point, the very last bullet there is that the provost appointed or tasks two committees with thinking about faculty and curricular issues, policies, and how to bootstrap something as broad and as new as this new faculty. So I'm very thankful and grateful for Maureen O'Cork and Mark Rovella for they are the chairs of these two committees, and they will just take the floor and maybe do a quick presentation about what the committee is, where it is. This is meant to be a Q&A, so at the end we'll just open it up for discussion. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks, Azar, and congratulations to all the co-organizers of the event. It's a terrific event, and as Mark was saying, it's grown every year, so congratulations to you, and congratulations to Azar on his appointment, and also thank you also to Eric on his appointment as the head of the Hariri Institute. So it's an exciting time to be in data sciences here. So our faculty was our committee was the subcommittee on faculty. And it became clear that our job really was to think hard and first about how CDS or FCDS establishes its inaugural faculty. And we had a chicken and egg problem, right, which was to create a faculty, you need a faculty. And so you'll see so here's the membership of the committee, which was, fairly broadly representative, included medical campus, et cetera. What we're more interested in, I think you've all seen that membership before, is the second slide. Oh, push down. Yes, high tech, okay. So this is probably the major output of our committee to date, which is proposed changes to the faculty handbook, which will begin making their way through the system shortly if they haven't already been deposited in it. One of the things that we thought was important is that recruitment of new faculty be in accordance with established and transparent procedures already set forth in the faculty handbook. So the changes proposed here amend the faculty handbook to bring CDS within it. They're intentionally written narrowly so we didn't accidentally trip into some unintended consequences by extending, for example, to programs that don't have hiring authority and ability to do so under the faculty handbook. So it's a rather simple and neat, some might say elegant, solution to the problem, which is simply to bring the Faculty of Computing and Data Sciences within the terms school and college, and dean to include the associate provost for computing and data sciences. And what that will do is have all of the appointment, promotion, and tenure processes already in the faculty handbook applicable to the new unit. The more complicated questions, which we haven't really resolved other than to raise questions, have to do with what Ozzy referred to in terms of the 50-50, the true joint appointments, because those implicate resources of the deans, and also how to maintain flexibility for arrangements other than 50-50. So I'll stop there, and Mark, why don't you fill people in on what your committee did? Oh, sorry.
So welcome, everybody. And I also want to congratulate the organizers. I know how much work is involved in this, and it's really it's just an enormous success and contribution to the university. And I want to second Maureen's congratulations to both Azure and Eric on their important appointments for the university. These are really steps forward for the university. So to tell you about what the Committee on Curriculum is doing, I can start, I think, by showing you the members of the committee. As Ezra mentioned, we were impaneled in November, and just like the other committee, we're covering many different parts of the university. So you've also probably seen this before. But to tell you what we're doing, the provost asked us to provide her with recommendations on the establishment of degrees and degree programs at all levels, at the doctoral level, the master's level, the undergraduate level. And the output of the committee will be a set of recommendations as to what BU should pursue in the areas of degrees and degree programs. We're not going to be recommending the specific structure of any degree to the extent that we would be specifying coursework or milestones or anything like that. But really the job of the committee has been to look at the spectrum of degree offerings that are possible. And I keep saying degree programs because I want to emphasize that there are other things besides just standard degrees that are really important when you're talking about data science. So to look at that spectrum of offerings and then ask what are the benefits of the various different kinds of offerings that we might consider? What are the challenges associated with putting those things forward? And what do we think should be done right away? Right away, as fast as the university can move. And what are the next steps, the specific steps that need to be accomplished in order for those things to be done? It's a really interesting exercise. It's a really, I find it unique because data science requires this interdisciplinarity that makes the needs and the possibilities so much greater than you would find in a traditional siloed department, if I borrow Azur's term. So we're thinking about a lot of different things, and there's a lot of considerations involved in what do students want, what do different kinds of students want, what do different kinds of faculty want. We consider the constituencies of the program both to be students who need degrees and faculty who need programs to educate their students. So as a concrete matter, we've started initially focused on the PhD. And the reason for that is that in order to hire into this new unit, we want to hire faculty who want to build large research programs, and those faculty are going to want to have a PhD program within the unit for their students. And so we're in the final stages of developing recommendations to the provost around PhD programs and other doctoral programs, other programs that can be connected with doctoral degrees. We'll deliver that report to the provost. It'll be up to the provost and the subsequent faculty of the Computing and Data Sciences unit to decide exactly how these should be implemented, what the timing should be, what the specifics of each degree requirement should be. So that's where we are.
Floor is open for questions.
So I'll start with a question about faculty. So I think this is for Maureen. Just curious how it's going to all work out. So with these 50 appointments, so if a faculty member in a current school or college becomes appointed 50% in the new faculty, does that school or college get that other half back, such that if they have two people who are appointed 50%, they now have a slot for a new faculty member? Because I'm sure that's very much on the mind of deans who care about how many faculty they have.
That's above my pay grade. So that's one of the reasons why we haven't addressed all of the issues associated with 50-50 appointments, because what we've really tried to do with those is identify the questions associated with 50-50 appointments, including what you just raised, without necessarily opining on the answer. The, to give some context, I think the committee's take on this was it's complicated because of the tenure question. And so if you take tenure track people, put the medical campus aside, right, and they're 50-50, and then one unit wants tenure and the other doesn't. Our take on that was the one that wants to tenure has to be ready to pick up 100%, so they have to, as a matter of budget, plan for that, right? With respect to tenured faculty generally, is there ever a point at which someone can say, I have a whole tenure in both departments and I don't want to be 50-50 anymore? That would throw a wrench into this whole question of, can the dean use the 50%? And, if there are two, cobble it together into one. So these are all complicated questions that we haven't yet really opined on.
Microphone.
I'm very curious. We have talked about, with that great visualization that you had before that you stole from the provost, of how we have silos and how we have the new FCDS that's going to span across the different silos. I'm curious to hear from any of you and all of you, how do you imagine a doctoral, master's, or bachelor's student choosing to join the Computing and Data Sciences program over purely computer science, purely math, purely engineering? How do you imagine that thought process going for a person as they choose to join the FCDS as a student?
Oh, that's a great question.
Thank you.
And one that has been much on our minds. So there's a lot of dimensions to your question. Just as a pragmatic issue, it's certainly true that students are not going to come to the university right away in enormous numbers as new bachelor's students in data science, simply because they many times haven't even been exposed to data science yet, right? And actually we have this problem in computer science where students don't get much computer science in high school, and they come in and they suddenly in the middle of their sophomore year discover computer science and really want to switch, and we have to figure out how to accommodate that. So one of the things that from a curriculum standpoint we're thinking about on the committee is how to make the movement of students into and out of the unit porous, to borrow Azer's term, porous, meaning that perhaps courses that are early stage courses could be shared could be cross-listed so that students can apply the credit towards, so that teaching responsibility can be picked up by the unit if it's course isn't offered in the other unit, that sort of thing. So, you know, we've also been thinking a lot about the PhD program, and when you think about admissions into the PhD program, there's this relationship with the advisor that you have to think through, and funding that you have to think through that relate to the admissions process. And we want to make sure that students can come in with the ability to learn about data science, even as PhD students learn about data science, and then sort of develop a connection to an advisor. That's, we think, an important model. So I guess the one sentence answer is we're trying to adapt to the fact that it's a new field. Students are going to be coming without necessarily a lot of exposure initially, and we need to be ready for that.
I have a question about when you're thinking about the spectrum of degrees and the graphic again. What criteria, what factors do you take into account in terms of prioritizing the different interdisciplinary programs and degrees? Like, how are you thinking about, well, we're going to start with med school, or we're going to start with comm? How is that thought process unfolding? Just from a criteria and sort of what factors are you considering?
The committee doesn't want to impose any kind of priority or ordering in the connections to external units. In fact, what we want to do is explain what are good mechanisms to make those connections flexible, easily established, and responsive as people come into the program and their interests shape the program, faculty, for example. So our goal is to not to specify that we should have, we should work on a PhD in health data science, but rather that we should have a mechanism established by the FCDS so that a degree like that is anticipated at some level, possible to set up, and that there are standards that the Faculty of Computing and Data Science has thought about before the conversation begins around a degree like that. So so we're sort of maybe at a bit of a meta level than on those kinds of issues. Yeah.
Other questions? I was sitting on a table there, and there was tons of questions about that. Why don't you fire some of them back to the committee? All right, here we go.
Hello, and thank you very much for a very exciting day and all of the initiatives happening. I was talking over lunch with Azar and asked most of my questions, but one of the questions that is probably more, not at a very high level, but across the university about teaching and courses that are being offered in data sciences. Every single department and program you can think of, not everyone, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think most of departments are designing their own curriculum for these courses. Let's say Data Science 101, and I think if as a university we could enforce such a mechanism that, let's say, every undergraduate student or every master's student, they should take such course, and it would be designed inside data sciences. So a lot of the efforts that individual faculty members are doing in their own program would be joined together, and we will have one standard Data Science 101 course that would be offered to everyone. And that would be, there are some universities that are doing this already. There are some studies that are saying 5 to 10 years from now, if you don't know machine learning, it's like you didn't know how to, read, 20 years ago. It's a measure of literacy, and just food for thought and thinking. I know we don't have it currently, but maybe in the future we could have such a university-wide policy to enforce some of the teaching to be standardized across the school. or if you have any comments, I would appreciate on this. You're doing something.
Yeah, I don't know that if I can speak for the committee, but I can say for myself, I completely agree with you. I think that the committee and eventually the faculty of computing and data science can establish expectations and standards for the kinds of courses you're talking about. And the committee is actively considering things like degree add-ons that can be thought of as a data science option that enhances your study within a specific discipline. It seems like a very valuable add-on, both from the standpoint of the student's education and from the employability. So that's the kind of thing that we're thinking very hard about, and we certainly think that is potential benefit for BU. And then as far as, university-wide standards, we have discussed in the committee the hub educational requirement and the fact that, maybe somewhere down the road, there's a good reason for thinking about data science as having a more prominent role in that set of requirements. But that's down the road.
I just wanted to add, partly in response to Gloria and in response to you, is it would be helpful on the 50-50 front to have some standardization, because that way, when you're thinking about teaching load and what does it mean to be 50-50 in one place, hopefully there's some overlap between the two. So for example, these were courses already offered in computer science that can be listed either way, and so hopefully that will ease that discussion a little bit. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that the changes to the faculty handbook don't actually solve the chicken and egg problem. The way that we plan to go about solving that is with the appointment of what do we call them? Founding faculty from among existing faculty that would have essentially 0% secondary appointments. That is permissible under the current faculty handbook, which leaves a tremendous amount of discretion to the units with respect to secondary appointments. And so as an initial matter, Azar would make an invitation to a group to form the founding faculty. Part of their first job would be to define a process by which others could apply to join the founding faculty. And from that group, you would be able to set up search committees for the initial hires and the APT committee for anybody, going through tenure, et cetera. So I just want to make sure that people knew about that.
Okay, one more question.
If I may ask one more question, because this is a very exciting discussion in my opinion. So I asked before, how would someone choose the Faculty of Computing Data and FCDS? Blanket. Anyways, we've talked too much. So I asked before how someone would choose the FCDS over just computer science, just math, just engineering. Now I'm wondering about the coexistence between all of these different faculties and all of these different schools and colleges. How does the Faculty of Computing and Data Sciences foresee moving forward a coexistence with computer science, for example? Well, we're saying, okay, computing is great. Now let's add something to it. Let's add this collaboration across all disciplines at this university. So now how does this new faculty turn to the Faculty of Computer Sciences and say, you're still valid, this is still important. We are a collaboration with lots of other things, but we also need math. We also need computer science. We also need engineering. Can I hear thoughts on how that coexistence will look like?
All right, I'll take a shot at this.
This is great.
The word coexistence suggests that there is a conflict, right?
Right.
Yeah, and that's a premise that I don't agree with. And I think that, can you hear me now better? Okay. So as I said, coexistence suggests that there's a conflict, and I don't see that. I see that these things are fairly aligned, and we want to set them up in a way that is the case. So I like to use the word, you think about this new faculty as augmenting, complementing and connecting with the existing departments, or silos, if you want to call them that. I think that this is actually important to note. One of the things that I became very fond of is that different disciplines have different cultures. Just accept that. So the idea of saying, that, well, there is an engineering culture which is different than a humanities culture, which is different than a science, etc. And we should respect that and actually enrich it. So it's not about forcing the units to work together. It's really about providing a bigger space where you have more of that ecosystem across all of them. Does it make sense? Yeah. Mark, do you want to add? Mark?
The only thing I would add is that I think that there's not necessarily going to be any question about validation or whether there's a still a value for computer science or math and statistics in the world of data science. But there is, I think, there's going to be a valid curricular distinction to make between the folks who you can pursue data science in a way that essentially is addressing foundations and methods. And that can be something that really is largely an effort within computer science or math and statistics or electrical computer engineering, these sorts of things. But there's a very equally valid way of pursuing data science in a cross-disciplinary, domain-related way. And I think it makes sense to think about those as slightly different curricula within the degree offerings, not to distinguish them or to even name them differently, but to recognize that what you study in one place is going to be different from what you study in one style is going to be different from what you study in another style. But I think that's just recognizing again the interdisciplinary nature of what data science and FCDS is doing.
I think we're done. Thank you so much, and thank you, Mark, and thank you, Maureen, to run to a class.